So good evening, everybody. My name is Kimberly Meck, and I am the Executive Director of the Alliance of People with Disabilities. I am a white female with a navy blue hoodie on, and I have my hair pulled back with sunglasses on my head. And behind me, you can see my brown ceiling fan, and thankfully you can't see the cobwebs hanging from it. I'm going to provide some information today about our accessibility. So we have captions available in Zoom. You can click Show Subtitle in your Zoom menu bar to turn them on. Captions are also running at streamtext.net. That URL is too long, but we will put it in the chat in a moment in order to have everybody have access to it. StreamText allows you to enlarge the font and change the color and contrast to the captioning. There's also a chat feature on StreamText, so you are welcome to submit questions or comments there, and we will monitor them and voice any questions during the Q&A break. ASL interpreters are available today. We are presenting in gallery view, so the interpreters should always be visible. You do not need to pin them. Please know that we have 2 interpreters. So if you pin the current interpreter, it could prevent you from seeing the active interpreter after an interpreter change. You do not need to be on Zoom to access this event. We will read all questions out loud and voice any images on the screen so that the content will be available to individuals calling in on the phone and those who cannot see visual content. This event is being recorded, and we will answer questions periodically throughout the discussion. Please use the Q&A tab for any questions you have, and please use the chat tab for general conversation and comments. Cart chat is stream text, can be used for both questions and comments. And also please note, we will use both person with a disability and disabled person interchangeably, recognizing different people's preferences for first person or identity first language. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and I'm going to ask Robin to take it away from here.
Thanks, Kimberly. My name is Robin Tatsuda. I'm the Executive Director of the ARC of King County. I'm a biracial woman with sort of olive-colored skin and dark, short hair. I'm wearing black headphones that has a little microphone attached and kind of a scoop neck black shirt. I'm sitting in my office, and behind me is a pretty bright orange wall, as well as kind of a white wall with open windows and pictures on it. So first, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the land of, sorry, I did not start that off well. Let's start over. I want to do a land acknowledgement. Many of us are coming from different places today, and I would like to acknowledge the land where I'm joining from, which is in King County, and it's composed of the unceded lands and waters of the Muckleshoot, Snoqualmie, and Duwamish tribes, all of which are part of the larger Coast Salish Indigenous people. We're grateful to live and work as guests on these lands and express the ARC's and the larger King County Disability Consortium's deepest honor and gratitude to the land itself and to the Coast Salish people who were the first people on this land and who remain here today. This land acknowledgement is one small act in the ongoing process of working to be in good relationship with the land and the people of the land. If you're interested in finding out whose land you are on, Kimberly will actually put a link in the chat for you to get that information. So now I'm going to do a quick orientation to what this event is about and why. So this is actually the 5th session of our Understanding Ableism monthly series. These events are hosted by the King County Disability Consortium, which is composed of over 40 disability serving organizations and individual disability advocates and activists. These Understanding Ableism events are led by the disability community, promoting disability justice within the King County enterprise. Our previous sessions introduced ableism, including racialized ableism, and last month we actually started honing in on specific systems, with the first being education. This month we'll discuss transit, and next month we'll discuss employment. We're excited to be joined by a very diverse panel and supported by representatives from the King County Mobility Coalition. So we're just going to jump into it with our amazing panel. So I'm going to invite each panelist kind of in order to first introduce themselves. I hope that you're able to include your name, your pronouns, a visual description of yourself, and anything else you'd like to share that you think is relevant. And then feel free to jump right into our first question, which is, what does accessible and equitable transportation mean to you? So, Hope, are you ready to jump in and start us off? You're muted, Hope, so.
I actually knew you were going to call me first. I was like, don't call me first. But I am ready. Hi, my name is Hope Drummond. My pronouns is she and her. I'm 3 feet tall. I'm right now sitting in my wheelchair, and I have on a white shirt with a brown necklace. And I work at the Alliance of People with Disabilities. I am a program manager and an independent living specialist. And I'm thinking you was asking me to do the first question, what does accessibility mean to me when it comes down to transportation? Am I correct?
Yes.
It means accessibility means a lot to me. Just being able to get around with no problems and having the right accommodations and being able to get around using all the transportation systems in Washington State. Um, to have no problems would make my day go flow better if the discrimination that sometimes happen in a transportation system was not there. So accessibility meaning having all the accommodations that I need to get around safely without any problems. Thank you.
Thanks, Hope. Okay, so the next panelist is Allison. And Allison, as a reminder, if you can do a quick introduction of your name and pronouns and a visual description, and then go ahead and discuss what accessible and equitable transportation means to you.
All right. I'm Allison Mello, she/her. I have fair or complected skin and kind of short hair, brown eyes, and I'm sitting in my office. And I think that accessible and equitable transportation comes down to a robust transportation system, different options to get to very diverse places in your community, not being limited to only particular corridors in the community, and having that transportation at robust times, coming, it's available when you need it, where you need it. And that's what I think it means to me, because I want to be able to independently get where I need to be when I need to be there. So yeah.
This is Robin. Thanks so much, Allison. Bruce, you're next up. A quick introduction of who you are and then what you think accessible and equitable transportation means.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bruce, and I go by he, him pronouns. Environmental information. So I have a sheet tacked up behind me, blue colored, and it doesn't cover the whole screen, darn it. So you can see a little bit behind the screen, but it's what I have. And equitable transportation for me, just as Allison mentioned, having it anytime, any place, anywhere. Impromptu, being able to plan on the fly, and planning is easy. I can get from point A to point B when I want to, without my friends or family or Various folks and various abilities can access that regardless. Doing what we want to do, when we want to do it, any day of the week, any month, any year. So that's all from me.
This is Robin. Thanks, Bruce. And I suppose I'm making an assumption, but both Bruce and Allison, is it true to assume that perhaps our current transportation system is not available anytime, any place, anywhere, sort of in the ways that you've described? Go ahead, Bruce. I feel like you're waiting to.
This is Bruce. That's a great question. And I've traveled around some. You know, in New York City, you can catch a ride at 4 a.m. anywhere you want to go. In Seattle, I would say that's not the case. It closes earlier and you've got to head home. So I don't mean I'm a party animal and then I'm out all night and on weekends, but just having that flexibility. Yeah.
This is Robin. Thanks, Bruce. Yeah. Allison, I see you came back on. Did you want to add to that?
Yes. I'm from Los Angeles, so our transportation down there is very dysfunctional. So when I moved to Seattle, it was a breath of fresh air. But you know, there's still room for improvement, hence, you know, the light rail opening up new stations. So there's still room for improvement, but it's leaps and bounds ahead of LA. I'm just going to say that.
This is Robin. That's fair. You know, it's certainly, it's good to know we're not the end of the spectrum in terms of access, but it also sounds like we're not at the top either. So there's lots of room to grow. Okay. Next, Celeste, would you like to come in and introduce yourself and share what you think accessible and equitable transportation means?
Hi, my name is Celeste Peña. I am a lighter skinned Chicana female. I have long brown curly hair. I have the old school iPod headphones before they did the AirPods. I wear glasses. I have big, thick eyebrows. And behind me is a white curtain with the black, I think it's called a fleur-de-lis. That could be wrong. It's like a fancy looking design. I use she, her pronouns. They, them is also cool. He, him is not ever preferred. And I am, I'm autistic and I live with chronic pain. For me, accessible and equitable transportation is pretty much what everybody else says, is that anyone who wants to or needs to use it can. They can understand it. It makes sense to them. It's comfortable for them. They can get where they need to go safely, and they can do it when they need or want to. Yeah, I guess that's it.
This is Robin. Thanks, Celeste. I mean, it sounds like there's a pretty universal agreement on what accessible and equitable transportation looks like, which that's great to know what we know what it should look like. But again, there's room for growth. So I'm going to go kind of work through our questions and keep going through kind of the order of panelists so you can predict kind of when you're up next. My second question is, what transportation methods do you use the most and why? So Hope, you're up first.
Hi, I'm Hope. So what I use the most is Access. I use Access the most because they are very accessible. There are room for improvements, but I can definitely depend on them to be at my home at the time that they need to be. I can also depend on them to get me to the destination. I can also don't have to worry about where I'm gonna sit, where I'm gonna put my wheelchair. I don't have to worry about none of that. I don't have to worry about if they're gonna have the lift down for me or not. It's always down for me, so they can load me into the access van. Yes, it's room for improvement, but at least I don't have that many worries. They get me to my destination. Um, they also help me with my son when I need to transport, going to the doctor for him. It's I feel more independent. In other words, with access, I can depend on some things that I don't have to worry about. So access is my number one go-to when I need to travel.
This is
One
Rob.
less worry.
This is Robin. Have you used the fixed route metro buses as opposed to access, and what's kind of the difference in experiences?
The metro buses, I have used the metro buses, and especially with my wheelchair, the problem I had and still having with them is the drivers have a choice. A choice means they have a choice to pick you up or not. They can make every type of assumption where they can say, I don't have space, when clearly they have space. They don't want to accommodate. No one is not going to dock them for that. So it's like a choice they have to respect you or not. Um, that's Metro. The light rail, they have a choice as well to disrespect you or to respect you. How? When you get to the light rail and there's a lot of people standing there, these people can move over to let the wheelchair in to get to their spot, but they choose not to. See, they have a choice because they choose to disrespect. Access, they choose to respect the ADA law. They choose to do that. But the other public transit, they choose to do either way.
This is Robin. So it's hit or miss. Like, you feel like if
Yeah,
you're going to use the metro buses or the light rail,
right,
you don't know for sure that
right.
when you're going to
Get
get
there.
on a bus, if people are going to allow you this space,
Yes,
when you're going to get to wherever your
right.
destination is, that kind of thing.
Exactly, exactly. I have been standing there at the metro zone. 3 buses passed me. They stopped. Oh, ma'am, I can't work the lift. They go. Second one. Oh, ma'am, I don't have space. Clearly, you could make somebody get up from the seating for accommodation for me, but they don't do that. So it's a hit or miss with them.
Mhm. This is Robin. I also feel like that, at least for me, I'm just like, gosh, that means that I'm not as valuable as a rider
Exactly,
as
exactly,
somebody who doesn't need to use a wheelchair.
exactly. And you can reporting them is like it's like water. It just goes through. You can report, nothing happens. They still do the same thing.
Mhm.
So access, at least you can depend on them getting you there. They're not perfect, but they not metro.
I feel like you should have a shirt that says that. Thank you so much, Hope. I appreciate you sharing
You're
that
welcome.
experience. Yeah. Okay, let's pass the baton over to Allison. Allison, what type of transportation methods do you use and why?
Since he is not in my background, I should first clarify that I have a guide dog, and his name is Sarge. And so what we use the most is the buses and the light rail. And I love the bus. I think it's fantastic because when I live in Fremont, Seattle, and so when we're moving or when we've found housing, we've always just like made sure that we live pretty close to like at least 1 or 2 bus lines, because it means, if after this call I wasn't sure what I was going to do for dinner, I could just be like, well, I'm going to go hop on the bus, go up to Greenwood and grab a bite. Like, there's no planning. I use One Bus Away to plan my routes and Trip Planner to plan my routes. And, like any kind of transit system, of course, the bus is late or or, stuff like that. But I've found that in terms of me and Sarge, like the bus drivers are always so helpful. They tell us, which side to go to. They make sure that Sarge has enough space underneath the seat to lay down. I don't use the light rail too often just because it isn't in my day-to-day kind of needs. It's mainly the bus. But when I have used the light rail, it's typically coming back from the airport. And it's been really nice to use as well.
This is Robin. Thanks, Allison. And I think it's such a great example of, like, if you even just compare, Allison, your experience that the bus system has been very positive for you compared to Hope saying the bus system has not worked. It's a common experience. There's so many different forms of disabilities. And some forms of disabilities might have greater success with one system than a different form of disability. Yet there's a tendency to put all disability under the same umbrella and sort of treat it as if it's all the same. And I think that's why we really try to make sure people with all different forms of disabilities are here, to show that that access and equitable looks different for different people. So I appreciate you sharing your perspective. Bruce, you're up next. What do you think? What transportation methods do you use most and why?
This is Bruce. So before I move on, I want to mention that I am a deafblind person, and I do have some central vision left, and so that impacts my answer to this. The environment for me, what accessibility means is, for example, I rely on APS. I forget what that stands for. But when I'm crossing the street, I rely on APS. So at an intersection, there's the crosswalk button, and the ones that vibrate are what I use. And that tells me when it's safe to cross the street. Unfortunately, in most of Seattle, they don't exist yet. They're either no buttons or they don't vibrate. And so that's a big part of my route planning, and a big part of what makes a route accessible for me is the vibrating APS. So that is part of transportation for me and part of what that process looks like for me. As far as which systems I use everything, bus, light rail. I enjoy the ferry. I go to, Bainbridge or Bremerton or Whidbey for a day. I'm a walker, so I walk a lot, and I'm happy to just walk on the ferry and go do some sightseeing. In terms of planning, I often use Google Maps, and I also use a trip planner. So that often informs what time I'm going to meet people, or if I have an appointment, I will use those two tools to make sure that I get there on time. And I also, do some research on, once I get off of transit, what does the neighborhood look like? What is that walking path going to look like? What direction do I need to make sure that I'm going to get to the building that I need to end up at? So I use those tools for that.
Thanks, Bruce. As I listen again and listen to the different people speak, when transportation works, there's so much just freedom to be able to live your life, to do what you want to do. As Allison said, hop on the bus to go get something to eat because I hadn't planned for it, or for you to say, I'm going to go over to Bainbridge and do some sightseeing. That's part of living, right? And transportation is an important part of that. I appreciate you sharing that, Bruce. I'll also note that Kimberly put in the chat that APS stands for Audible Pedestrian Signals. And it's helpful to also know that I don't know if all APS systems vibrate, but that vibration is important. Okay.
Perfect.
So awesome. Thank you, Bruce. Celeste, are you ready? I'd love to know what transportations, if any, you use most and why.
Most often, my husband drives me. And if he can't drive me, I just can't go. I don't have any family here, and I don't really have a lot of friends here. And especially with the pandemic, you couldn't really rely on that anyway. Uh, if it's a place that I go a lot and have gone pretty regularly, like a doctor's office or therapy appointments, I might drive myself. But even if it's like a dentist appointment, something where I'm gonna have a lot of sensory issues, I might still need the ride. Which at first wasn't, I mean, that can be really limiting. It is really limiting. But now we also have a 4-year-old who's non-speaking autistic. So my husband can't give me a ride without also taking our son with us. There's no one to watch him. So I just don't really go anywhere anymore. A lot of the bus stops are either uphill or downhill, and it's hard for me to make that. The nature of my disability is that it's really unpredictable. I don't know how I'm going to be day to day, and it's hard for me to be alone. But it's hard for anyone to go with me. So it's yeah, either I just don't go anywhere, or my husband takes me.
This is Robin. I think that's such an important thing that you talked about, Celeste, that again, all different forms of disabilities have all different forms of access needs. And while you aren't per se a wheelchair user or a service animal user or somebody who has, like experiences deafness or blindness, the nature of your disability makes it very difficult to utilize the public transit system. And so then you rely on folks like your husband, but there's significant barriers to that as well. So I think, again, we can't assume that a system is going to work for all people with all forms of disabilities, and that there needs to be options. And even still, I think we'll get into this later, Celeste, that not all options are truly accessible to folks with varying needs. So thank you so much for sharing. Okay, we're going to go on to question number 3, and Hope, you're up first, so just getting you ready. In what ways can transit services be more accessible to you? And I noticed there's going to be an interpreter switch, so let me pause for that. Okay, so Hope, in what ways can transit services be more accessible to you? What is working and what needs improvement?
So one thing is to recognize that a person with disabilities have the right to travel. Also, having space for a priority seating for those with disabilities. But even if you have those, to make sure that you are held accountable to make sure that person with a wheelchair is able to be seated or able to have that space. Also, to recognize that we have a right to travel and that we are here. And so I'm thinking of some things to, it's, when I used Metro a long time ago, there was like 3 Metro drivers that knew me, and they stopped, they made room. Hey, Hope, how you doing? And they made room for my wheelchair and everything like that. So it's just having that respect to load and unload a person with a wheelchair, and knowing that we as people with disabilities, we are out here and we want to go places and be able to do that with ease. And once we have that, everything is fine. And so that would be my answer for that question.
Yeah, this is Robin. We want to go places and we want to do that with ease.
Yeah, with
Right?
ease. Yeah. Because we are here too. Because we are disabled doesn't mean we're less than what people are. We are people. We are human. And we want to get there, you
Mhm.
know. And so people in the wheelchairs, I have to advocate for people in the wheelchairs because we suffer the most.
Mhm.
I know that you don't want to move somebody back to let the wheelchair get in there, but that's your job. You're supposed to follow the ADA, and we don't want to fight all the time. We want to advocate all the time. We don't want to have to do that.
Mhm.
We want to be able to get on and load.
There's two things that come to mind, Hope, as you say that. I think one is, again, just that basic concept of people with disabilities are people and humans,
Yes, we
right? Who
are.
want to
Yeah.
live a life, who want to go to work, go to the store, go have some fun,
Yes.
right? Do the things.
Yes.
But you might need to utilize public transit sort of more,
Mhm.
perhaps, than a non-disabled person.
Right.
But that doesn't minimize your value as a human being.
Exactly. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It
And
doesn't.
then the second part that came to mind as I was listening is, for the folks, whether it's the bus drivers who don't stop or
Mhm.
it's the other riders who don't move out of the way,
Right.
they may see it as, oh, this is a single occurrence, this one time. But you
Right.
are saying, no, this is a repeated
Repeated.
systemic occurrence,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That this is an
Yes.
attitude within our society
Yes.
that is, again, devaluing me and other
Yes.
people with disabilities.
Yes. I
Mhm.
would love to wake up one day and say, oh, I want to go get something to eat and just catch a metro bus. But I have to think, oh, if they leave and not get me and my child is staying out there for I don't know how long. And and then if the next bus comes, but it tells you on the computer, on your phone with the app, the next bus comes, he have a choice. He can choose, say, oh, I'm sorry, it's raining and we don't have any room. But me and my son is still stuck out there.
Yeah.
So for safety, I have to be, take the access for safety reasons.
This is Robin again. That's such a great point that it didn't even occur to me as you said it. Access requires how much notification to plan a trip ahead of time?
One day you
One
can.
day.
One day, if I want to plan something for tomorrow, I can call in and plan it for that next day.
Mhm.
Not the same day service, but that next day. But it give you options. It's better
Yeah.
than nothing.
It's better than nothing, right? But as we were listening to Allison talk about how nice it is to be able to just hop on the Metro
I
bus
wish I could.
and go grab something to eat, right? Or just go out
Yes.
and do something fun. That's not an
Yes.
option. So
Mm-mm,
your
it's
ability
not.
to sort of live in the moment
Right.
is not allowed because
It's
of the
not
nature
allowed.
of that
I
access.
wish it was.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it changes your experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hope, thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Okay. Allison, what do you think? What are ways that transit services can be more accessible to you? And what is working and what needs improvement?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is like downtown, there are a lot of buses, and that's fantastic. There's lots of buses to get different places. But you have these huge bus zones that are like 3 or 4 buses long. And if you're visually impaired, you're told to stand at the front of the bus zone, and that all the buses will come up to you and say, like, I'm the 65, I'm the 28, whatever. And I'd say that's like a 50-50 shot. What I've started, and it can be difficult because it's like, okay, so the 28 pulled up right in front of me. I don't need the 28, but you're saying that 33 is like 2 buses down. So now I've got to make sure like I can go get that before he leaves. So I feel like while that policy might be there, I'm not a bus driver, so I don't know if it is really like written in. I feel like there needs to be just more strong enforcement of it. And bus drivers have been really helpful in the past. Like, if the 28 does pull up in front of me and I'm like, man, like I'm not looking for the 28. I know there's a bus behind you, but before I go run over there to not, to just have them tell me it's the wrong bus, can you tell me what bus you see behind you? And they're helpful. They're nice about it. And I've had bus drivers flag down other buses for me in these kind of like busy zones. But if there's a way for these busy zones to be like, hey, I realize you're 3 buses back, but I need you and I just don't know that you're there. One thing that I do, but I don't think it's the right solution. One thing I do is like, I always have 1 bus away, right? Open while I'm at the bus stop. So I know, okay, so in the next minute, the 28, the 5, and the 40 are going to show up here. So I'm going to keep an eye out or ask whatever bus comes up to me, like, hey, great, I know that you're this bus, but do you see the other bus behind you? But I think just like the real time kind of like maintenance by me is not that conducive. I think it's not that difficult for, them to take an extra 5 seconds to just be like, I'm the 60, I'm the whatever, or those outside announcements need to just be a little bit louder, because though, especially in those like really busy zones, that could make all the difference. So you wouldn't have to rely on another bus driver helping or a pedestrian helping. But the things that I think are working are, I love all of the announcements inside. I'm kind of reminded of San Francisco Transit. And so like the BART system, it's like the BART driver who announces the next stop. And I never can understand what they're saying. I have no idea what they're saying. The microphone's too loud, they're muffled, they say it too fast, but I love the automated, just computerized announcements. It makes keeping up with where you're going very helpful. I like that. And I think that's my answer.
Yeah, this is Robin again. Thank you, Allison. I agree. There's definitely transit systems where those overhead announcements you either can't understand. It sounds like or it's just not loud enough, like you said, especially in those busy parts of town. And that's a helpful thing. And I also I appreciate your point that there is a difference in experience if you're using a bus in a busy place like downtown Seattle, or at like a bus station, or kind of like one of those larger, I don't know what you'd call it, a depot kind of transit center. Thank you. As opposed to, routes where maybe just 1 or 2 routes kind of cross it. And so there's not likely multiple buses coming at the same time.
Yeah, like for instance, one of my routes to where the way I get to work is like transfer from the 44 to the 48. And there's 4 bus stops where the 44 and the 48 cross paths. But I knew that the stop at the light rail station would be so busy, so many different buses, different bays. I was like, no, I am not transferring there. I'm just going to transfer at the one before because it's really calm. It's just on UW's campus. It's way easier. There's like 3 buses that go there. Not a big deal.
This is Robin. Allison, did you have to figure that out on your own? Or did anyone help you know that that would be probably a more accessible option for you?
Well, I kind of just took a gamble. Like I knew that the light rail station would be hectic because I've been to that light rail station and to the bus zones. I didn't know much about like the UW stops because I haven't had to be in the U district very much. But my husband lived in the U district before, and he said that those stops might be like more calmer, especially more calmer than the link.
Yeah, this is Robin. The reason I ask is because in my experience, and it's important, I didn't say this, I don't identify as having a disability. at all. But I work with a lot of people who do have disabilities, and my experience with the people I know is that most folks have to learn it trial by error on their own, each individual person, as opposed to the system sort of helping figure it out or offering strategies or being available to problem solve. And it sounds like you were successful in it, but you said you had to take a gamble. You weren't sure, but you had to
Yeah.
gamble. And for some folks, for whatever reason, a gamble is a really scary thing to do. And if it doesn't go well, it's very frightening what could happen next. And so it's a challenge for
If I could
folks.
add one more thing,
Yeah.
I think also that I have like a network of very independent, blind and low vision friends. And so sometimes it'll even be like, hey, have you taken this bus? Do you have any suggestions? So like we kind of feed off of each other too.
Mhm.
And so that's really nice. Even like, people might have been to a bus stop before and they're like, oh yeah, there's also like an audible signal if you need to like cross the other way at that street too. And so that's been helpful.
Yeah. This is Robin. That makes a lot of sense, that learning from other folks with similar support needs and experiences is probably the most reliable way to help get information besides your own just trial and error.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Allison. Celeste, what do you think? How could transit services be more accessible to you? Can you think of anything that's working, or like, I imagine you have ideas about what could be improved? And I realized, shoot, can I cancel that, Celeste? Because I think I skipped Bruce. So, Bruce, I apologize. How rude of me. What do you think? How ways can transit
I'm
services?
crying over here, Robin.
I know. I was
Crushing.
it was a deliberate assault, Bruce.
No worries, no worries. Luckily, we're close to happy hour, so you're excused. So a few things I want to mention in regard to the comments that have been made so far. I have similar experience. And, people will say, oh, the driver's pretty good. Or, I can get on that bus because the driver is okay at this time. I think Allison mentioned about the queue of buses, having that lineup of buses. That is frustrating. I hate when there's like 2 or 3 or more buses lined up and they're blocking their number signs so you can't see which bus it is that you want. Is it the second, third, fourth? Not even sure who's here, which bus numbers. And buses not stopping sometimes. The overnight buses versus daytime, different beast altogether, entirely different experience there. But one thing that's helped me, let's see, when I moved to Seattle, I was lucky to have an O&M instructor, and we went out a fair amount together and learned different areas. An area close to my home, an area that was close to work, the area that was located near my doctor's office, a transit center. And I walked all of those areas and really got a look at, where things were. Where's the APS? Where's the crosswalk? Where not to cross the street? So I felt like I developed this cheat sheet, how to operate in those areas smoothly as a pedestrian, how to navigate them. And for environmental information, like things will change. Let's say a window gets broken, there's glass damage on the sidewalk, or somebody's tipped over a garbage can and you have to navigate around, or the bench is broken, that kind of thing, visual information. I do remember I have my bus kit. It has numbers on it. It's a plastic kit, has 3 different numbers that I can change. So if I want to catch the 525, I can flip the kit to 525 and hold that up in front of me. And that kit, I'm going to trust that the bus 525 is going to stop when they see that number displayed, and we're going to make contact somehow, and I'm going to make it onto that bus. 90% of the time, I would say it's successful. Sometimes they drive right past. Somebody else, I think Allison, you mentioned about them doing the announcements of the next stop. I don't hear anything verbally, so I rely on my phone for that type of information. Or they sometimes have those reader boards on the bus or the train, but it's not consistent. It's usually located above the driver behind his seat. And the light rail doesn't seem to be great. Metro varies, so it's not consistent throughout the whole system. It's a lot of work too, looking to try and find that reader board, try and figure out what the next stop is. That takes a lot of energy. And sometimes other passengers are not friendly. I remember one late night trip, Capitol Hill to home. And I guess everybody was pretty tired. I don't know. It was dark on the bus. And I was looking for the first available seat. I saw a seat there. I went towards it. And I was about to sit down. Just before I sat down, somebody grabbed my ass and bawled me out. And I was like, what is going on here? And the person had put their iPad or their equipment, excuse me, their pizza on the seat. And so I didn't see it. And sometimes, you know, it's just an example. Other passengers are not friendly.
This is Robin. I have so many thoughts on that, Bruce. I think like that passenger piece, and this comes up in the work that I do. There's both, you know, the drivers or the people employed by the transit services and how they are or are not welcoming and inclusive. But there's also the other patrons who are using that service and how they are or are not inclusive, and then how the employees respond to that. I wonder if you have thoughts on that, because I can see your facial expressions. Do you have thoughts on that?
I think the driver is the key. You know, if the driver is friendly and looks approachable, then I think we'll be okay. But sometimes the drivers are busy. They're paying attention to other things. I've had a few experiences where I just was taking a step onto the bus, the lowest step, and the driver took off. Like, didn't see me and took off. I lost my balance. I could have, you know, been crushed by the bus. Pretty scary stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is Robin. Gosh, that's horrifying. Yeah, that's obviously a very huge problem. Yikes. One other thing I heard you say that I wonder if you want to elaborate on. You said you have a very distinct, different experience with daytime versus nighttime buses.
Well, that's a great question. Yeah, right. Nighttime, for example, you're heading home. You've gone to some party or something, some social event, and depends on the area of town. You know, it could be a rough spot and the mood of people around you. Maybe it's a less pedestrian trafficked area, so it's quieter, less people. And maybe people are not paying necessarily good attention. It's the end of their workday or work week. So I tend to want to avoid those types of situations.
Yeah. I noticed that someone wrote in the chat real quick, how does your sense of safety change?
Let me think about that a little bit. It's more, I just feel I have to pay attention more. Where, you know, depending on where the destination is, where I'm trying to get to. Did I have a good experience getting there before? You know, walking to that stop or walking to another place? Should I walk to another area because it feels safer and more comfortable? And there's more stops. The stops are set further apart after midnight. They don't stop at every stop. So you just have to take those things into consideration, more to think about.
Yeah, this is Robin. Yep, that makes sense. And I imagine that can impact people in different ways, depending on where they are and all those different factors. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to finally let Celeste speak because Celeste was just about ready to share these incredible insights and I cut her off and it was rude of me. So Celeste, I apologize profusely and I invite you to share.
This is Celeste. No, it's fine because I actually wasn't ready. I was like, I'm not Bruce. So I knew. So I guess in what ways it can be more accessible? I guess it's easier for me to answer the ways that it is not accessible to me. I do have an issue with, I can go someplace 12 times during the day and then go once at night and it's completely unrecognizable to me. I don't know where I'm at anymore. So when they do make a change, like now there's less stops, but I've relied on there being 5 stops and me recognizing this location, but now it's only 2 stops away and the location looks entirely different. And there's not been enough to communicate to me that that change happens because they just assume that I would know it. There's a lot of assuming that we just sort of know how the bus works. I came from a small town in Arizona that did not have a bus system besides the school bus, which dropped me off a block away from my house. So this system here is very different from that, round trip that I did before. It seems really complicated to me. Even as a college educated woman, I don't have the spatial reasoning to understand how far we've gone. My auditory processing works in such a way that I can hear everything that they're saying. I just don't understand it in the moment. And that's only if they're saying it with no one else talking. If anyone else is talking, then I don't process or understand any of it at all. And I also have ADHD. So on the rare times that I did understand it, I did process it and now it's gone and I lost what they said. So I just need a lot more consistency and reminders and things to show me and tell me and alert me to what is happening. And because I don't know if it's maybe because I don't, my disability is invisible, there's just this assumption that she just knows. She's just going to figure it out. She should just see. Excuse me. But a lot of times it's what's happening is I'm masking. Like I'm trying really hard to not rock or sway so that no one calls the cops on me because they think that I'm on drugs. But in doing that, I've lost even more ability to process and understand the things that are going on around me. And if I have something like my son with me, then the focus is even more diverted and it's just too much. So it's something that I just don't even try anymore because it can put me in a panic attack or a meltdown, which almost always guarantees that then the cops will be called or something. So it becomes more dangerous than it is beneficial. in a lot of cases for me. So I guess maybe if they had, one thing that would be great is if I could watch a video of what the trip is supposed to look like and how it changes from day to night, or have someone explain that and have me, so I can just find it before my trip and know, like, okay, this is what it's going to look like tonight. Okay, this is what it's going to look like today. That might be more accessible for me.
This is Robin. Celeste. Thank you so much. I think you hit on so many important points. And one big one is just there are most people with disabilities have invisible disabilities. There is sort of this assumption, whether your disability is visible or invisible, but certainly invisible, that you already just know how to use the bus, right? That you're fine. And if you weren't fine, that you would know how to seek help. I don't even know if I would know how to seek help on a bus, and I don't have a disability, but there's an assumption that people do. And then I think what you're saying is super important, and I don't know how familiar people are with the concept of masking or the concept of people with disabilities, especially as you described autism, having to pretend to not be disabled in order to fit in and not freak people out. The amount of stress it sounds like that you experience going on the bus or sort of being in public, you're working hard to ensure everybody else's comfort so that somehow you don't get yourself in a situation again, like you had mentioned, the police coming or somebody thinking that you're drunk or on drugs or whatever. And that effort is taking so much from you that it's also then hard to track the bus routes and things like that. Was I understanding that correct, Celeste?
Yes, exactly. If I sit and focus on something else, I can pretend to look like the average person and sound really great, but other things are happening in my head that makes it harder for me to receptively take in what you're saying. Mm-hmm. But if I could look away and move as I want to, then you can actually talk back and I would hear what you were saying. Versus otherwise it's just like an intense focus of acting or playing a game or doing something other than just naturally being.
Mm-hmm. And we know that oftentimes the general public is not comfortable with some of those movements or ways that your body wants to do to help you be able to sort of accomplish what you need to. And so then if you're doing those things in public, it puts you at risk of other problems. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. I also, it struck me when you said that, you rely on patterns and recognition and that things look different day or night, or that, changes in schedules, if it's a 3-stop during the nighttime and a 5-stop during the daytime, that throws you off. And, how are those things clearly communicated? How do folks prep ahead of time? Those are all great points, and certainly things that really could help people better predict, right, and plan ahead for, but those aren't necessarily available easily, at least. So I appreciate your feedback on that. Okay, you guys, we're plowing through. I hope you're having fun, because I am. Our next question, and Hope, you're up first. What impact does accessible transportation have on your life? What would your life be like if you did not have accessible transportation?
Okay, so the first question, how, within my life with the transportation, I'm more independent. And to understand what I'm talking about, the second question will have to come up. The second question, if I didn't have it, I live in Mississippi. I live there. That's where I grew up. We didn't have transportation. Not like that. Not like this. We only had school bus, sure enough, and probably one organization for people with disability out of the whole county, and that never worked. I was more dependent on my family. And people think, oh yeah, depend on your family, that's a good thing. No, it's not when you have to wait and they have to consider where they're going to take you if they're going that way, you know, if they're going that way, they'll say, okay, yeah, I'll take you, but you have to get somebody to pick you up. So it's I would be more I would feel like I'm in Mississippi again. I moved out here for accommodation to feel independent. And now that I'm a mom and everything, the transportation system, if it's working right correctly, it's awesome. When my independence is there, you have to understand we don't have transportation like I didn't have when I was in Mississippi. This is like heaven to me to have so many choices. Even though Metro and light rail leaves a bad taste in my mouth, if I can say, but at least there are choices. You know, at least there are choices, and I didn't have those choices in Mississippi. So how it impacted my life, it gave me my freedom, if I can say. It gave me my independence. It made me feel really good that I can do it and I can get there when I want to. And so that would be my answer for both of those questions.
This is Robin. Hope that freedom and independence, I feel
Yes.
like can't
Yes.
be emphasized enough.
Yes.
And from my impression as a non-disabled person, the concepts of freedom and independence are not a guarantee for
It's
people
not.
with disabilities, right?
Exactly. Right.
And when the things are in place that are needed for
Mhm,
you and any other person with a disability to have that sense of freedom and independence, it is a game
mhm.
changer, right? It's a life
It
changer,
is.
right?
It
The
is.
quality of life, the sense of self-determination and opportunity is completely different.
Right. Right. Because it's like I remember when Zion had his first fever and it was high. And I was like, oh yeah, if I'm not using my wheelchair, I'll call Lyft or Uber, you know. And I had a choice.
Hmm.
I had a choice, you know, and I was independent. I was mommy, you know, mommy can take care of this, mommy can do this, you know. But if I was in Mississippi, I would have to rely on somebody to actually get up and take me. Oh, hope that's hold on. I'll be there in 15 minutes. How high is the fever? Then they questioning me. Now I feel like I'm dependent, right? So it gives us a sense of freedom and independence that we are looking for when we have those transportation in place and it's accessible and accommodating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Hope, one last thing. I think it's so important what you said. You can just be mommy, right?
Yeah.
That when those things are in place, you're just another person
But I can
trying to take
plan.
care of your kiddo.
I can plan taking him to the zoo. I can plan that instead of somebody saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was going to take you out, but I can't because something else came up."
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, you know that feels bad to a mom that with a disability because you try to get there. Now, you know, I have choices. I can call access. I can get in a Uber
Hmm.
and say, "Come on, Zion, we're going to the zoo," and we get there. I have choices, and I need those choices.
Those choices are critical. And
Yes.
I feel like often transportation there's always a risk of transportation funding being cut
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then choices being reduced,
Ugh, yeah.
right? And that,
Yeah.
I imagine,
Scary.
brings flashbacks
Scary.
of Mississippi to you.
Yes. It's scary. I'm like, oh my God. It's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Hope.
You're welcome.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right, Allison, what do you think? What impact does accessible transportation have on your life, and what would life be like if you didn't have it?
Basic things that are, I think, crucial to anyone's happiness. Like, I am able to independently get to work, go to the groceries, meet up with a friend, go to the movies, just like do everything that's ordinary, go to the airport, Although I'm usually lazy and don't want to carry my luggage on transit, so I'll take like an Uber, but it's there if I'm not feeling lazy that day. But just doing normal things and just having those experiences available and feeling like you're on an even playing ground. And this comes to mind a lot because, like, for instance, I'm from LA, and in LA they do have transit, but transit is kind of like the buses are kind of seen and they like, you know, it's a car city. So like the buses are, you don't want to ride the bus. The people who ride the bus, you know, whereas in Seattle, it's like very different. It's kind of got that Bay Area culture where just like everyone takes the bus. Lots of people. I have cited non-disabled friends who take the bus to work. Like I just have people who don't, I know people who just literally get rid of their cars because they're like, well, you know, I can get everywhere I need to go either by walking or taking the light rail. And so it feels like an even playing ground for me. And if it wasn't there, I would be really dependent, and I don't like being dependent whatsoever for anything. So yeah.
Mhm. I love that you said again, like the sense of independence, and you don't like to be dependent. I don't think I know anyone who likes to be dependent. But when people experience disabilities, independence becomes much more contingent on accessibility of things like transportation and just ensuring that whatever it is that's out there that a person with disability can participate into like anyone else, and how important that is. I also love that you said the even playing ground, right? That when there's accessible transportation, again, it doesn't matter if you have a disability. You can go to work, you can go out to eat, you can hang out with friends, you can go to the airport, you can do whatever you want to do. And accessible transportation doesn't separate you out in any way as different or whatever, and that all people can participate in it. But again, unfortunately, it's not always a guarantee. And so there's a huge importance to ensure that transportation is there and remains accessible. Thank you, Allison. Okay, remember my order this time. Bruce is up next. Bruce, what do you think? What impact does accessible transportation have on your life, and what would it be
Hi
like if you didn't
there,
have it?
Bruce here. And the question again, could you restate the question one
Yep,
more
yep.
time?
Yep, this is Robin. What impact does accessible transportation have on your life? And what would your life be like if you did not have accessible transportation?
Sure, the impact would be big. So in my previous life, I could drive. And I remember my last car. It was a Jeep. I loved it. Could open the doors, take them off, put the front window down. It was fun to drive. And when I retired that past life, I moved to Seattle because I knew there was a pretty good system in place. And I decided to accept that approach to everything in my life, going to the doctor, going to work, going to school, being part of community activities and events, going to a protest, going to city parks. Seattle has some really nice parks, a great park system. Lincoln Park, Seward Park, Marymore. We're pretty blessed here. And I appreciate the flexibility to be able to access all those places. For people who don't have disabilities, they don't realize what's involved to get accessibility, to go to work. Okay, so to go to work, I have to leave the house a little earlier. Earlier. I can't get there quickly. It's going to take about an hour. I have to plan for that. Am I going to use the bus? Will I be late if the bus is late? Do I need to catch an Uber? So there's more work and more planning involved, and more time as well. A lot to set up before I actually do it. I'm thrilled to live here in Seattle. I use transportation a lot. I did live in LA previously, and you're right, it's built for cars and very disappointing. I lived in Denver too, and I would say it's also built for cars. The airport is located 20 plus 25 miles out of the city. Here, it's so easy to get to the airport, and I appreciate that flexibility. The cost is good for the transit system, and it has a huge impact. I'm happy to be living here, and I've been here for 20 years. I'll probably die here and be buried some future date.
This is Robin. Hopefully that's in the much
And-
farther future.
And I'm hoping, unless, I'm hoping that the cost will just continue to go down. That would be a good thing.
Yeah. Thanks, Bruce. I realize for sake of time, I'm just going to have to kind of keep things moving. I like to stop and reflect and but that's slowing us down. So I'll zip it. And Celeste, what do you think?
For me, accessible transportation is when I can use transportation for the joy of just transporting. It's not even just to get to a location because I have to go there, but just the joy of the ride or being in a different place, and that it's not so annoying and burdensome to use transportation that it can be enjoyable. Because which is sort of, we live in the United States. This is a place where people like driving and going on a drive and going places and seeing. So that should be something that as disabled people we can enjoy too. And even just me coming from my culture, who were nomadic people, we're meant to not be in the same place all the time. We were meant to move. And what my life is like without that is that I can't move, is that I stay stagnant and I stay in my home and we don't get to go anywhere. It's what everyone else has complained about for the last year of being stuck at home. It's living that life all the time when you don't have accessible transportation.
Yeah, this is Robin. Exactly. I appreciate that comparison, that feeling of stuck at home, which most of us, I think, can relate to at this point. It that in itself is burdensome, is harmful. I think somebody wrote in the chat that transportation is a health issue, right? Because when you aren't able to get out of your house, it really impacts your emotional health, your physical health, all of those things. And I love just the joy of the ride. You're right. Like we are a culture and a community where we just sort of like to get out there and move and travel and go for a ride or whatever. So thank you for that. So I'm going to shift gears a little. Based on our time, there's been some questions that have come up in our Q&A box, and I invite anyone in our audience who has questions to type them in the Q&A box. But before I go to that, I do want to note that we've seen a few questions and comments in the chat related to like rideshare, like Lyft and Uber and things like that. And I wonder if any one of our panelists just have any thoughts about rideshare, especially if it was not accessible to you for one reason or another. And you can indicate that you've got something to add by turning on your camera. Yep. So I see Allison. Do you want to start, Allison?
Yeah. So I want to start out with the most logistically reasonable thing to say. And that is, if I'm taking an Uber or Lyft, and don't get me wrong, I do. Not very often though, because if I can get there on transit, it's cheaper. I mean, if I'm going to go to do anything, grocery shop, then you have to factor in the cost of an Uber on top of that. why would I do that? I don't know. And then another thing is Sarge has gotten us denied before. Not like he didn't do it personally, but you know, they see Sarge and then they're like, just kidding, I'm not taking you. And that's upsetting, and that just basically makes your whole adventure out already just have like a sour taste in your mouth. And I think that is my thoughts on Uber and Lyft, is just, you know, the money factor. And, you know, it's gotten a little bit better, but they still deny for service animals because there have been so many fake ones.
Yeah, this is Robin. Yeah, I've heard that a lot, that feedback about service animals, and also just that the expense is a barrier. We haven't even gotten into sort of conversations related to how many people with disabilities are sort of forced into poverty and that sort of thing. So
Even just being, I mean, that's just an extra money that, like, even if you're in a financially secure place, it just seems like if the option is there to take, I guess maybe I'm just a frugal person, but like if the option is to like take something there that doesn't cost me money, I'm gonna do that because it's like, well, then my, you know, $40-$50 adventure out to go like grab a drink with a friend becomes like $70 because I have to like factor in an Uber.
yeah, for sure. Yep, it makes a lot of sense, Allison. I appreciate it. Did anyone else just want to jump in and comment on Uber, rideshare, even taxis? Hope, I see you. Go ahead.
Yes, so there's one thing, and it may be a hope problem, that when you are in Lyft and you using, and I like to look at the map, you know, the Google, see where they're going. And it's very scary when they off route and then your phone says rerouting. And when you're trying to tell them, well, why you get off route? But this is easier, you know. So when it comes down to Lyft or Uber, you still have to be careful, and know exactly where you're going, because it's easy to be trapped and they can take you somewhere. Even when you're using that map, it's still going to reroute, but not necessarily tell you exactly where they're going. It's rerouting to your home, but if they keep on turning different, you know, avenues, the map is just going to just reroute and still show they go into your home, but they may not be. So I kind of stopped using Lyft a lot of times because of that. It's kind of very scary. And when you're a person with a disability that's seen, they'll try to pull one over you all the time, all the time. So I have to know exactly where I'm going and to get there, or not use Lyft at all.
Yep. Hope, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And certainly like there's a safety concern and a trust
Scary.
that's in
Right.
there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you for
Scary.
that. Yeah. Anybody else want to join and comment on this question? I will add that to the best of my knowledge, at least locally in the Seattle area, the rideshare systems have not developed wheelchair accessible vehicles. And so if you're a wheelchair user, you know, a full-time wheelchair user, then that's just not even an option, which is also a huge barrier. So let's go to the Q&A box. Cassidy, would you like to turn on your camera and introduce yourself first? And then you can maybe introduce a question that's come through the Q&A.
Yeah, sorry, I'm turning on my lighting in here isn't great. So this is Cassidy speaking. My name is Cassidy Giampetro, pronoun she, her, with the King County Mobility Coalition. And I've been trying to stay on top of Q&A here. So it looks like we only have 10 minutes left. I'm just going to read in order kind of who asked first to give that due diligence, and hopefully we'll be able to get to everyone's questions. So Lily asked kind of a technical question. So first I'm going to present the question that Mandy asked, which is, when talking about access, what do you think about how access has such high screening requirements? And Mandy said, I know people, even those in wheelchairs, who are denied. So just curious if any of the panelists have experience or thoughts on the screening process of access.
And this is Robin. Go ahead and just turn your camera on if you want to comment. Gosh. Oh, here we go. Hope. Okay, go ahead, Hope.
I'm sorry, my computer's trying to mess up. But yeah, it's an extensive screening process. It's weird because they do deny some that's in wheelchairs, but they figure that they can get to the bus stop. They figure, and this is the thing. Those screening process is, I don't think it should be, I don't think it should be there. I mean, because they have they're thinking that, okay, I see that person in a wheelchair, but that person can catch a bus, that person can get to the bus stop. But you don't know that even a person in a wheelchair can have all types of disabilities. You're not putting that into your category of thinking to bring out an answer. All you assuming is, hey, this person in a wheelchair, and yes, they can get to a bus stop. As long as we make sure that the bus stop is somewhere near their home or not up a big hill. And so that's the assumption. And it could be very discriminating as well. So I understand what she's talking about.
Yeah. Thanks, Hope. Celeste, I think you also turned your camera on. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I don't qualify at all for any services for my disability. I'm considered autistic level 1, which means that they think that I can do everything if I just work harder. So I don't qualify for any services or any help or I don't get access. And yeah, it's really limiting. I know that it's by design, like they on purpose are trying to limit how many people use this so that they don't have to pay as much. It's so I know why they do it, and it's on purpose, kind of messed up.
Yeah, thanks, Celeste. It just reminds me, almost every disability system out there requires you to extensively prove your disability, which that in and of itself is an ableist concept. But adding to it, not only do you have to prove your disability, but you have to know how to describe it in just the right way for that system to allow you to use their services. And nobody teaches you that. There's no handbook out there for how to speak the right disability language in the right disability system. And so a lot of folks who seem very likely that they ought to be approved are denied just because, you know, either they didn't write it the right way or they're considered to have to, like, that they should be able to do it, as Celeste described. Thanks. All right, Cassidy, do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, this is Cassidy again. So I just want to read one of Mandy's comments that I think we already addressed. So Mandy had asked, do you ever use Uber and Lyft? Are either accessible? So I think we already kind of had a conversation, but just to read some of the responses that were put in the Q&A. Allison had responded, I use Uber and Lyft as a last resort. If I don't have to pay to go out, I'm not going to. And then Celeste had responded, I'm a stay-at-home mom and my husband is the only income for us. It gets costly to use Uber regularly. So kind of just affirming some of the points we heard at the beginning of the Q&A. And now I'm going to ask a question that Kelly had, which says, how do you handle all the changes, like temporary bus stops or bus stop closures? Are those changes communicated adequately? And if they're not communicated well, how could they improve this communication? And let me know if you want me to repeat that.
So again, go ahead and turn on your camera if you want to comment. I'm not seeing anyone who's just jumping on the opportunity to comment. So I apologize, but Nobody, well, Celeste and Hope have come on. So Hope, go ahead, and then Celeste, real quick.
Well, do that question again because it just slipped my mind. What was the question?
Yeah, of course. This is Cassidy again. It's how do you handle kind of communication changes of a temporary bus stop or bus closures? Do you think that the information is communicated to you well, or are there ways that
Not.
you think that it can be improved?
It's not especially during the COVID. A lot of things that transportation over the whole board have not communicated effectively to the riders of what's going on. They have done some, and I can only speak with access. It wasn't communicated effectively of what they was doing about the with the COVID and how safe we would be on the uphill transit. Would we be 5 feet apart from each other, or so none of that came through for none of us. And the way I felt, I really I really had a meltdown because of I did not know what my next move would be for transportation, because everything wasn't communicated effectively. And what could they improve communication? They can improve communication more better to us, especially for those that ride access and have been a access rider for years. And then not for them to respond and not have a general answer for us. It's not cool. So communication could be more effective.
This is Robin. I saw Celeste and then Bruce.
I would say that I don't handle it. I usually get lost or confused or upset, or I miss my stop, or I don't handle it, and it's not communicated in any way unless it is like a major change, a full shutdown of a route that's changing entirely. Then I'll notice that there's some communication. But everything else they just figure is like minor, and you'll just pick it up, and I don't. So yeah, I don't handle it.
This is Robin. Thanks, Celeste. Bruce, did you want to add something?
Yeah, this is Bruce. Just briefly. So one of the changes that comes up often is construction. There's so much construction happening everywhere in this area, and often I don't know about it until I arrive at my destination. And then I, as a pedestrian, I have to find my way around. And that is a real pain. And I wish that there were more communication about that. I think that's a huge gap in the communication that we do get.
Thanks, Bruce. This is Robin. I noticed, Cassidy, I noticed that Kimberly had said there's a verbal question. Kimberly, are you able to help know where that, how to respond to that?
This is Kimberly. Marie Marquardt, if I slaughtered your name, I apologize. Please go ahead and ask your question.
No, that's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
Great.
you, Marie.
Okay, so I wanted to comment on this topic because as a transit instructor, it is imperative that I know about every route that is happening with the people I train. And I have to search, let me clarify. I have to diligently search to make sure every route is so on top of it, and there's no changes, there's no barrier. And I really believe that you guys are so right on because Metro fails in this communication about routing. So I'm with you guys, but I'm not sure how to get Metro to change their communication. So I just want to relate that it's not only you or the panelists that are having difficulty with all these, not getting the changes. It's universal. So I think we just have to keep letting Metro know that this is a problem and we've got to keep working on it.
This is Robin. Thanks, Marie. I know we're just minutes from our 6 o'clock hour, but I want to respect if there are any other questions. How many more questions do we have, Cassidy? And is it worth trying to do one or two more, or should we just wrap it up?
Yeah, this is Cassidy. I actually think we got to all of the relevant questions for panelists. I think there might be one we can follow up on afterwards. But the only remaining question was one that Marissa said kind of was already answered. So I think we're good to close that portion out.
Well, this is Robin, and I'll take full credit then for being kind of right on the hour, but Kimberly's going to wrap us up. So take it away. You're muted, Kimberly.
This is Kimberly Meck, and I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. We really appreciate all of the attendees and all of the panelists. We really appreciate you sharing your lived experience in regards to ableism in transportation. Just as a reminder, our next event is on the third Thursday in June 17th at 4:30, and our topic for June is going to be ableism in employment. So thank you, everybody. Hope to see you all there. And again, if you registered for this event, you will be receiving a link to the recording. So thank you very much.
This is Robin. Thank you. Have a great night. Take care.